When it comes to NFL content here on YouTube, draft grades are far from a new concept. Some people talk about their favorite draft classes and their least favorite draft classes. Someone might have a channel that's specifically dedicated to one team and only focus on that team's draft class. Somebody, like I did last year, might talk about the 8 divisions and break all of their draft grades up into 8 videos. Somebody else might just talk about the draft in its entirety in one video and then move on. All of those are very valid and very effective ways of getting your message across and talking about the NFL draft. However, because I did not make nearly as much pre-draft content as I wanted to, because being a college student, watching film, trying to have a social life, trying to make videos, and not driving yourself crazy is not exactly a great recipe for success, I kind of failed with that. So I decided, hey, let's make 32 videos throughout the summer talking about the 32 draft classes, give each team their own designated video to justify all that work we did pre-draft. And initially I was going to do that throughout the month of May and then move on. That fell through the cracks. So we bled into June. Didn't get it done in June. So we bled into July, and here we sit on July 30th, and I am just barely halfway done because life is hectic. So because of that, we are going to bleed once again into the month of August and hopefully get these done before the season starts. In fact, we will get these done before the season starts. But before we get into our next team, whoever that may be, I do just want to say real quick, keep in mind, I'm not a professional. I am just a 21-year-old college kid who likes to spend the free time he has watching tape. So, if my opinion doesn't line up with your GM's or line up with yours, I'm not saying I'm better than you. I'm not saying I'm better than your GM or that I know better than your GM. I just had a different takeaway, and people seem to like when I give my opinions about this stuff on the internet, so I'm going to continue doing it because it's fun, and it helps me get my points across, right? It's a lot of fun. I enjoy making these videos. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and what they did during the 2024 NFL Draft. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are a team that I have had a lot of fun kind of quietly watching from a distance over the past couple years, because I was really intrigued to see how they would attack life after Tom Brady, right? Obviously, you bring in the greatest quarterback to ever touch a football. He's almost 40 at that point, or he was 40. Past the age of 40. He comes in, wins you a Super Bowl right away. Only plays another 2 years. Don't quite have that same success. And then you're kind of left in purgatory, but they've done a great job retaining their veteran assets, guys like Mike Evans, obviously. Lavonte David, still one of the best linebackers in football. You have some younger pieces like Tristan Wirfs, who I know there's some contract disputes with, but I'm sure they'll get it done. Antoine Winfield might be the best safety in football. He just got paid. It's some exciting rookies last year in Kalijah Kancey, Yaya Diaby. This is a good roster. And this draft, they did a hell of a job making sure that they not only have a good roster, but they are continuing to add to that roster, and that starts with their first-round pick, Graham Barton, the center out of Duke. The only complaint I have with this pick, I will tell you straight up front, the only complaint I have, the only reason this is not an A+ for me, is because I thought Jackson Powers-Johnson was a pretty safely better player. Like, I had a much higher grade on Jackson Powers-Johnson than I did Graham Barton. And considering they're playing the same position, like if Graham Barton was going to play guard for you, which according to ESPN, he's not, maybe there's something I don't know. Maybe they're really high on Robert Hainsey and really low on Ben Bredesen, but I don't see that being the case. So the fact that Barton is going to be playing center for you, I just think Jackson Powers-Johnson is a much better player. That being said, I did still have a first-round grade on Barton. He was the 23rd player on my board, the second interior offensive lineman on my board. You get him at 26, the value is great. Looking at Barton as a player, extremely explosive athlete, high-level space blocker. He has the range, he has the energy, he has the power, he has the mentality, the ability to finish strongly. He has a strong, compact frame. He really, his mass is evenly distributed, so to speak, so he's not top-heavy, he's not bottom-heavy. It's pretty, from what you can tell with the way he moves and the way he attacks different linemen, he's definitely evenly distributed in terms of mass, which is such a weird thing to be talking about with a grown man, but gotta love football, right? That's a thing that actually matters when you think about it. But moving off of that, he is tremendously flexible, which is really nice. He's got the ability to recover pretty well if he gets knocked off his stance or whatever. If someone hits him in a way he's not expecting, and he kind of gets jarred a little bit. He's very good at recovering, very good at being able to torque his body in ways to, win blocks dominantly. Legs are really strong. He's able to keep his legs moving throughout the snap, throughout his blocks, really effectively to drive guys off the ball. Effortless knee bend along with that flexibility. He's able to maintain a wide base. Hand usage is really good. Anchor's really good. Grip strength is really good. The only things you got to worry about are like arm length, but that was more of an issue of him from moving to from tackle to the interior. Obviously, at center, that's not going to be as big of a deal. So guys that are a little bit longer in terms of arm length are going to give him some issues, but typically you don't see a whole lot of them on the inside. His hand placement could be a little bit better, but that's something that can absolutely be coached. There's going to be times where when he's really like driving somebody down the field because of his kind of lack of length, he's going to go almost chest to chest with them and wrap them. And obviously you don't want to see that. Swim moves are something that are going to give him trouble as well. But that being said, a lot of the issues I have with him can be coached. It's not like Barton is an ancient prospect or anything like that. He's coming out as a senior, but I think he's a very, very good player. I think he's somebody you get excited about. Obviously, you haven't had a great center since Ryan Jensen. Granted, that hasn't been that long, but it's nice to see that you're getting someone who I think can be a legitimate top 3 to 5 center in the NFL within a couple years. Just because, you need that support. You need somebody who can kind of be the head of your offensive line like that. And now you start to look at Tampa Bay's offensive line. Tristan Wirfs, Graham Barton, Cody Mock, Luke Goedeke, 4 guys that I trust a lot. Goedeke had his big breakout last year. Cody Mock looked really good as a rookie. Ben Bredesen is the one player where I'm like, you could do better. But even then, he's a good Band-Aid. And they drafted a guy in the 6th round who we'll talk about that, who knows, maybe he can end up taking over for Bredesen. But I do really like the Barton pick. Like I said, just a little bit of development needed, and the biggest complaint with it is that they didn't take Jackson Powers-Johnson. But I do think that Barton is a player you can get excited about. Plus, you didn't have to trade up for him or anything. Like I said, he was 23rd player on my board. 26 is pretty good value. That's a good pick. Moving into the 2nd round here, they take Chris Braswell, the edge rusher out of Alabama. Obviously, Dallas Turner's partner in crime, standing at a good 6'3", 251 pounds. Definitely more of a power rusher as an edge rusher. He was the 10th edge on my board, had a mid to a late 3rd round grade on him. You take him here in the 2nd. I don't love that, especially when you look at some of the edge rushers that he went ahead of. Big one for me is Austin Booker, and I know that's a super unpopular opinion. I'm not going to sit here and act like everyone had Austin Booker super high like I did, but, guys like Jonah Ellis I thought were a lot better. Adisa Isaac, those are 2 guys that I definitely would have taken over him. Marshawn Nealand even, you have the upside there. But Braswell's a high floor guy. He's somebody that's going to come in day one and just be a solid starter or a solid rotational player. I don't know if he'll actually start because obviously you've got Yaya Diaby coming off a big year, and Joe Tryon-Shoyinka is still pretty okay. But he reminds me a lot of Joseph Osai, defensive end for the Bengals and edge rusher for the Bengals, who I was a huge fan of when he was coming out. He got hurt a couple times. Isn't exactly what I thought he was going to be, but looking what Braswell does well, compact, explosive, linear athlete with a very good power profile. Great first step. He's able to pair that with long arms to utilize a killer bull rush that is his go-to move. He can re-extend quickly, which pairs with his unrelenting leg drive to make that bull rush even deadlier. So, if you're an offensive tackle that struggles against the bull rush, you are going to have one hell of a time dealing with Chris Braswell. There are flashes of ankle flexion and the ability to slightly bend the corner, but you're not going to confuse the guy for like Von Miller. He's got some work, or I want to say he's got some work to do. Some guys just don't have it when it comes to bend, and I think Braswell's probably going to be one of those guys. It's really hard to learn how to bend. That's one of those things because it's a physical thing. You either have it or you don't. So, I don't know. Maybe he can improve upon it a little bit, but there are some flashes there. That's exciting. He's really good at using his one arm, his dominant arm, his right arm to kind of get up underneath of a blocker and forklift them. And then he can use his other arm to utilize counters and things of that nature. He's able to fake one way and then quickly cut inside to beat slower tackles, which is one of the things he does when he leaves that other arm free. He's also capable of utilizing his power to work inside as opposed to going through or around a tackle. Hand usage is really good. Chops, swipes, clubs are really good, like supplementary moves to that initial bull rush. And he does flash a cross chop move. If you don't know what the cross chop is, that's basically what Aaron Donald made a career off of. That was his go-to move. If you have a young defensive lineman that can do that, they're in a great spot. Now, his athletic profile is probably going to limit the upside of that, but if he can tap into it a little bit, that is scary. So looking at the weaknesses here, limited athletic profile is going to be an issue. That, in my opinion, limits his ability to be like a true number one edge, like that alpha, you know, think your Max Crosby's, your Myles Garrett's, your TJ Watt's, your whoever else, Nick Bosa's of the world. I just don't see Braswell ever being that. And obviously, if he was going to be that, he probably would have been a first-round pick, right? It's pretty much a pure north to south athlete with stiff hips and lackluster core strength. He's got a high cut frame, which is going to create issues when he's attempting to change directions. As I already said, bend is going to be an issue. Leverage isn't a strong suit of his either, as he is going to jolt himself upright at first contact more often than you'd like to see. You'd ideally like to see him dip into his counters a little bit earlier. You know, he will use them, but sometimes it's like he has the prime opportunity and he's just stuck on that first move instead of trying to get that counter in there. So you want to speed up his internal clock there a little bit. But the biggest thing for me is when you watch Nick Saban defensive ends, you watch Alabama, you watch any Alabama defensive lineman really, there's a lot of discipline against the run. Like last year, my big take that blew up fantastically was Will Anderson wasn't my number one edge rusher because he couldn't finish tackles super well. And that blew up in my face. He was another Alabama defensive end. But I never had a problem with his run discipline. You know, being able to read the running back, being able to read option plays, being able to, you know, fill your lane and set the edge and things like that. Braswell just doesn't have as much discipline as you usually see from those Nick Saban guys. And there are going to be moments where he's just straight up going to let guys run right by him because he's so focused on the guy in front of him. And that is an issue. That is something that you definitely need to improve upon with him. We'll have to see what happens in Tampa. Obviously, they've got some good guys in there, and I like their defensive staff, so we'll see if they can work that out of them. But that's like, by far and away, is my biggest issue with Braswell, is as a run defender, you know, usually you see these bigger, bulkier, stronger edge rushers that rush with a lot of power. They're typically pretty good run defenders. Braswell is not that. Braswell needs a lot of work as a run defender, but he's going to be a good power rusher. He's going to be a good player in a rotation, so I can't get too mad at the pick. I think it's solid. Would like to see him be a little bit better against the run. That's going to be the big key here. As we move into the third round, they made three picks apart from each other, the first of which was Tyke Smith, the safety out of Georgia. And I'm going to tell you straight up, I didn't watch him before the draft. I don't know how Tyke Smith was not on my radar, but I got to safeties very late in the process and only ended up watching 10, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to double check that here. I did. Somehow he wasn't one of them. However, one of the benefits of me taking so long to get these videos out has been I've had time to go back and revisit players that I didn't watch. And I've prioritized these guys that were picked on day one, day two. Luckily, there weren't any day one players, but a couple day two players. And Tyke Smith was one of the first ones. And I'll tell you straight up, the big reason why I gave this an A- and not, you know, an A+ is because they took him over two of my higher graded safeties. First of which was Malik Mustafa, who I thought was the best safety in this class. And then also Cameron Kinchens, who I was a pretty big fan of coming out of Miami. But looking at what Tyke Smith actually does well, pretty good player. Very smart player. Really good at reading and reacting to both the run game and the quarterback. Great energy. One of those guys that plays with their hair on fire. Lots of experience. Used as a chess piece at Georgia. Can play a bunch of different spots. He's got the kind of build and physicality to his game to either be like a box safety, a true strong safety, or even a nickel corner, which looking at Tampa Bay's depth chart right now, I would assume they probably want him playing in the nickel. That's where I would play him personally. But, you know, if they want to start him over Jordan Whitehead, that's also very positive. He has quick feet, bursts really well out of his breaks, good vision and awareness in zone coverage. He can cover slot receivers and tight ends very well in man coverage. Shows toughness close to the line of scrimmage when it comes to meeting blockers head-on against the run. Great at diagnosing things pre-snap. Good blitzer off the edge or from the slot. Shows nice straight line speed for a safety. He's very feisty when it comes to getting downhill against runs and screens and things of that nature. Very rarely runs himself completely out of position in run support. There's going to be times where he overshoots a little bit, but he's pretty good at kind of repositioning himself and fixing himself there. He's a really strong tackler. He's really good at picking very smart angles of pursuit. He's patient when mirroring wide receiver releases from the nickel. Got his hands on a lot of footballs his senior season, had 4 interceptions. Doesn't allow almost any yards after the catch once guys bring in catches. He's going to allow catches from time to time, but he's not going to let them pick up any extra yards, obviously. Played pretty good on special teams as well. Now on the bad, he's short and he's stocky, which is going to hurt his projection as a safety a little bit for me. His lack of arm length is going to show when it comes to not forcing a lot of incompletions. It's hard for him to kind of get an arm in there because his arms just aren't as long as most safeties. When it comes to flipping his hips, there's going to be time where he's going to give up a lot more ground than you'd like to see. Schematically, it seemed he was going to be limited coming out. I don't think that'll be the case for Tampa. He fits in with what they want to do for sure. There's going to be issues with his recovery speed against faster receivers. He's an average athlete when it comes to staying connected to routes when running from behind. Not going to do a lot of... Basically, he's not going to play catch-up very well. That's what I'm trying to say there. He's not great against twitchier receivers. Lateral recovery isn't great. You know, he's just somebody who plays reckless, isn't the most athletic player in the world, and probably projects best as somebody that's going to play at or around the line of scrimmage or out of the slot. And I think that's perfectly fine for what Tampa's doing. That's why I'm giving this an A-. But I just think Malik Mustafa would have been much better at that. You know, I was a big Malik Mustafa guy coming out of Wake Forest. So it is what it is. I do think it was a good pick. Then the next pick here, they end up taking Jalen McMillan, the wide receiver out of the University of Washington, their first of 2 Washington offensive players. McMillan was my 17th ranked receiver, had was an early to a mid 3rd round grade on him. I did have him ranked higher than his teammate Jalen Polk and much lower than his other teammate Roma Dunze, who ended up going to my Chicago Bears. But when you look at McMillan, McMillan is a really nice slot, kind of like, or like a Z type of player. You know, you look at a guy like Chris Godwin, God love him, very good football player. He's not getting any younger, right? So long term, you do have to kind of think about a replacement for him. And McMillan's somebody that I think can absolutely fill that role. He's got the speed, he's got the explosiveness, he can play vertically, he's agile, he's fluid, can flow upfield with ease after the catch, has great spatial IQ to find soft spots and zones, possesses smooth, precise throttle control on his route, so he's really good at kind of pacing himself throughout his routes. Very diverse route runner with the ability to pull away on crossing routes. He's a twitched up mover who can offset DBs with quick, aggressive releases. Natural hands catcher, capable of securing contested catches over the middle of the field, able to smoothly and effectively track the ball in the deep third while contorting his body to get underneath of it. So great ball tracking ability. Instinctive sideline catcher, able to keep his feet in bounds, has the versatility to play on the boundary, in the slot, or off motion. In my opinion, I think he fits best as a slot or a Z. We'll have to see what Tampa wants to do with him. And he's really good at making defenders miss after the catch with a jump cut, which is one of the most lethal moves in football as a ball carrier. Now, because of that skinny frame, 197, he is going to get diverted easily at the line of scrimmage. If he can't beat you with quickness on his release, then you're probably going to body him. His 20% career contested catch rate is far from ideal. His short routes need a little bit of development. His ability to beat the press outside of those quick releases is inconsistent. And he dealt with injuries throughout the 2023 season, which is a little bit concerning. So we'll have to see, you know, kind of what happens there. But I liked McMillan. The only issue here is I did think there were better receivers on the board. Look at a guy like Taj Washington, Tez Walker, Johnny Wilson, Javon Baker. Those were just the 1, 2, 3, 4 guys I had right ahead of him on my draft board. So I don't agree with taking McMillan over guys like that, but we will have to see what ends up happening here. McMillan's exciting. I think he's a fun player. You can work him in the slot right away, and then over time, I think he will make for a good Chris Godwin development if he can. Or Chris Godwin replacement if he can develop, excuse me. So, good pick there in the 3rd round. And then we get into the 4th round, and this is probably where I'm going to lose some of my Tampa fans out there, because Bucky Irving is a player that I don't exactly love for Tampa. Because, like, I get why everyone liked Bucky Irving. I liked Bucky Irving. He was one of the 10 best backs in this class, in my opinion. I had a late 3rd round grade on him. But the problem is, I just don't see why Irving is the guy that Tampa wanted. Because to me, Irving being a 5'9", 192-pound back is going to serve best as like a scat back, a pass catcher, a 3rd down back. Because that size is tough. And when you don't have great vision between the tackles, and we'll get into the strengths and weaknesses, it's just hard for me to see like a big role for this player, especially when you have Rachaad White. And Rachaad White is one of the better pass catching backs in the league, had 1,500 yards from scrimmage last year. I just don't see it. Like, there were power backs on the board, or, you know, at least more powerful backs that would have served them better. I thought Braylon Allen was the best running back in this draft class. He was still available. Kamani Vidal, who is just a straight up bulldozer, reminds me a lot of former Tampa Bay Buccaneer Doug Martin. He was still on the board. Audric Estime, he was someone who, you know, not the fastest guy in the world, but was a grinder between the tackles, very smart player. He was still on the board. I think any of those 3 guys would have been a much better pick here. But to take Irving here just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Now, I'm not going to sit here and act like Bucky Irving is some player that I hate and I don't see any use for, because that's not true. Incredibly creative player, very elusive in space with the ball in his hands, instant accelerator with easy lateral movement skills, true home run hitter from the backfield, vision outside, like on the outside of the tackles in open space, is fantastic, great at bouncing runs to the outside, can change directions at the drop of a hat. He has a lethal jump cut with rapid footwork, better contact balance than you'd expect from a little fellow, runs hard for extra yards as a result, only 1 career fumble, highly productive in college, averaged 6.5 yards per carry and forced 70 missed tackles over his last 2 years, and he's a productive receiving threat with the potential to even line up out wide. However, he's never going to be a true RB1 standing at 5'9", weighing 192 pounds. He struggles to pass block. He's going to get moved and beat to hell and back when he tries to. His big play hunting gets him in trouble, especially when it comes to running between the tackles, because he's trying to bounce everything outside. He's not somebody I trust to run between the tackles at all. And he underwhelmed testing-wise, which isn't exactly what I saw on tape, so I'm not going to make a big deal out of that, but I did have that in my notes. The point is, I like Bucky Irving. He's an exciting player, and this is one of those picks where we're going to find out right away whether or not it's going to work out. You know, if Tampa has something great going right away in the backfield with their run game, if, you know, this whole thing is just really worried about keeping Rachaad White healthy, then maybe there's a world. And maybe Chase Edmonds and Sean Tucker are a little bit more than I want to give them credit for, or they add a different power back that can serve that purpose. If that happens, then I will happily eat my words, because I like Bucky Irving. He's a fun player. He was one of the few Oregon offensive players who I'm like a huge fan of this year. But for Tampa, for what I felt they needed, for what I saw as a weakness on this team, I just don't see it. Granted, it is the 4th round, so it's not like this is going to tank their overall grade or anything. But when you only have 7 picks, you do have to be hypercritical of all of the ones that come before like the last 2 rounds. So it is what it is. Irving is a fun player. He'll be fun as hell for Buccaneers fans and Madden, if nothing else. And, you know, Rachaad White's contract, I'm sure, is running out here before, well, it'll run out before Irving's contract runs out anyways. So we'll have to see what the plan is. But I like Irving as a player. Don't love the pick. Felt there were not only better players available, but better fits available. So we'll have to see how that works out. Then in the 6th round, they take Elijah Klein, the offensive lineman out of UTEP. And I'm going to tell you straight up, I didn't watch him before the draft. Not going to pretend like I did. He's someone who I went back and watched a little bit of. Found out that he was PFF's highest graded lineman period in the country last year, which, not a huge PFF guy, but they tend to do some pretty solid work with offensive linemen. So that's definitely saying something. He has good length, good upper body power, good footwork and technique, especially against double teams. He's able to work up to the second level and hit linebackers, has accurate hands, excellent vision against twists, like he's good at picking up on stunts and twists, stuff like that. He's a little upright getting out of his stance. There's going to be times where he's going to lose his balance. Not great at driving guys off the ball. He's going to get up on the balls of his feet rather than planting his feet and going. Pad level is going to be an issue, especially against bull rushes. He's a projection. He's a developmental player, but in the 6th round, you can't say it's a pick I'm upset about. Can't say there were any guys here who I'm like pounding the table like, Tampa, you really screwed the pooch here. You should have taken X, Y, and Z. No one like that. This is a good enough pick. I'm sure they saw something in the more tape that they would have watched on him than I did, because like I said, he's somebody I got to a little bit later, and considering it was a 6th round pick, I won't lie, I didn't go through my full film study like I did with a guy like Tyke Smith, who was a 3rd round pick and I didn't watch before the draft. So I kind of got the gist, and I'm grading off of that and the projection and the value and the process and things like that. And I think it's good enough. I think they did a good job. Give him an A for that. And Devin Culp, a little bit more of the same. Obviously, I saw some glimpses of him watching Michael Penix and watching some of his teammates. You know, he's undersized, fast tight end. There's a few crazy grabs on tape where you're like, oh my God, what? Let me see that again. He did that? That's not Rome? Like, you know, he had a couple plays like that. Good body control. He is, like I said, a good athlete. He's able to redirect his weight to hit moving targets in space as a run blocker. But, you know, being an undersized guy, he's not super strong. He's not somebody you're going to rely on to catch through traffic a lot. He's not somebody you're going to expect as a dominant inline blocker. His hand placement and pad level as a run blocker are pretty rough. His ability to kind of sink and open his hips isn't great. And I noticed he had some issues when Michael Penix would put like a little bit of heat behind the ball. He had some issues kind of getting his hands around it. So we'll have to see how he adjusts there. But, you know, taking a flyer on a tight end here in the 7th round, can't be mad about it. You look at their tight end room now, you've got Cade Otton, who I think is pretty solid. And then O'Keefe and Payne Durham are blocking tight ends through and through. In fact, both of them, you can make an argument that they're more of a fullback than a tight end. Had to bring up fullbacks at some point in this video. It is my one time of video status quo. But love them to death. Love O'Keefe, love Payne Durham. They just don't give you what Culp does. He gives you something this tight end room just doesn't have in speed and those kind of like highlight reel grabs. And plus, maybe he was underutilized, because when you're coming out with Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, and Rome Odunze, you know, you're the 4th guy in that offense. So we'll have to see what happens with him in Tampa. If he makes the team, he could be somebody that's a sneaky good like wing tight end for them. But, you know, I can't say I'm expecting a whole lot, but he is an exciting player to maybe theorize about. But all that being said, I think Tampa Bay did a really solid job. Not my favorite draft in this division. I've already talked about my 2 favorite drafts in this division with Carolina and New Orleans. They did a lot better than Atlanta, if that's any consolation. So as a whole, I'm gonna give them an A-. I think they did pretty good. Graham Barton, got some day 1 starters with him and Tyke Smith and Chris Braswell, in my opinion. Jalen McMillan, Bucky Irving, it's going to be interesting to see how they fit into the offense, especially Irving. Like I said, he's somebody that kind of day 1, you're going to find out whether or maybe not day 1, but pretty quickly, you're going to find out whether or not him and Rachaad White can successfully coexist. And if they can, then fuck it. I will happily eat my words. I will make a Bucky Irving film review. I will be Bart Simpson writing up on the chalkboard. I will never doubt Bucky Irving again 100 times over, because I'm a huge fan of his game. I just don't love the fit in Tampa. And then Klein and Culp, I think, are fun flyers to take on day 3. Very fun developmental guys that maybe could be something. We'll have to see. But the future is bright in Tampa. You got your quarterback locked up for the next couple of years. Got some good offensive pieces. You got some good defensive pieces. This is a team that I absolutely think can win this division. I think they can make some noise in the playoffs. They're a Super Bowl contender. We'll have to see. But there's a lot of reasons to be excited if you're a Tampa fan. And I think this draft gave you at least 3 or 4 more reasons to be pretty fucking excited if you're a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan.
Had a chance on the throwback.
This was an ill-advised throw. What an unbelievable catch by Cole Kmet. And he cups it too. No movement when he hits the ground, tucked up against his shoulder. Wow.
Using that